Under the scorching heat of the field, a man made a simple yet powerful act of kindness. He had no idea that, in that very moment, he was changing his life forever. A young stranger carried much more than a lost gaze and dusty clothes. When the easy more so truth came out, nothing was ever the same again. Before you hear this heartfelt story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The sun mercilessly punished what remained of Hope Ranch. Thomas Mitchell, 45, observed the horizon with tired eyes, his calloused hands resting on the worn fence that barely managed to stand, much like himself. The property that had belonged to his family for 3 generations was reduced to sterile fields, cracked soil, and bitter memories. "They'll be back tomorrow, Thunder," he murmured to the imposing chestnut horse beside him, the only friend left after years of relentless drought. The animal whinnied softly, as if understanding the weight of his owner's words. The banks would wait no longer. The collection letters piled on the kitchen table were clear. Either pay the debt accumulated after years of lost harvests, or lose everything. The irony didn't escape Thomas. The land that had fed generations of Mitchells was now swallowing him alive. What would my father say if he saw me now? The question echoed unanswered in the arid vastness. Joseph Mitchell had built hope with his own hands, transforming a forgotten piece of land into a prosperous ranch. "Good land is that which knows its owner's sweat," he used to say. Thomas had sweated, bled, begged the sky for rain, but it seemed that nature and the banks had made a pact against him. That morning, Ryan Taylor, the regional bank manager, had been direct. "You have until the end of the week, Thomas. After that, I'm sorry, but the ranch goes to auction. 5 days. 120 hours to achieve a miracle. Or sell Thunder, the only thing of value he still possessed." The thought made his stomach turn. The horse wasn't just an animal. It was his companion on long journeys, a silent witness to hidden tears, the last link to times of prosperity. The cell phone, old and with a cracked screen, vibrated in the pocket of his worn jeans. It was Martha, his sister, who lived in the city. "So, what did the bank say?" Her voice, always firm, carried poorly disguised concern. "The usual, Martha. They want money, not family stories or promises." A sigh from the other end of the line. "Thomas, we've talked about this. Sell the ranch, come to Chicago. Peter can arrange something at the construction company for you." Peter, Martha's husband, a successful civil engineer, the man who, in his sister's view, represented everything. Thomas should have been pragmatic, ambitious, adaptable. The job offer was recurrent, as was the refusal. "This land is in my blood, Martha. I don't know how to do anything else." "Blood doesn't pay bills, brother." The conversation ended as always. A silent impasse, filled with unspoken words and genuine concern. Thomas loved his sister, but she would never understand. For Martha, the ranch was just land, bricks, and debts. For him, it was identity, purpose, heritage. As he walked back to the simple house, accompanied by Thunder's gentle trot, Thomas tried to organize his thoughts. He needed to make a decision. Colonel Brandon, a neighboring rancher who had been trying to annex Hope to his vast properties for years, had offered a good sum for the horse. Enough money to buy time, perhaps negotiate with the bank. The idea of handing Thunder over to that man, known for treating animals like machines, tore him apart inside. It was like selling a piece of his soul. "How did we get to this point, friend?" he murmured, stroking the horse's glossy neck. The animal responded with a gentle head movement, its intelligent eyes fixed on his owner's. In the simple but immaculately clean house, Thomas prepared a strong coffee. The kitchen, with its old furniture and the wood stove he rarely used now, because of the costs, was the heart of the property. On the walls, black and white photographs told the Mitchell family story. His grandfather next to the first tractor, his father, proud in front of an abundant harvest, his mother in an apron, surrounded by workers during the harvest festival, times when Hope Ranch lived up to its name. One photograph in particular always caught his eye. Thomas at 12, mounted on his first horse, a gift from his father. It was the day when Joseph Mitchell had declared, "This ranch will be yours one day, son. Take care of it as you have taken care of this horse, and it will never abandon you." The promise, like the name of the property, now seemed a cruel irony. The coffee, bitter and strong, burned down his throat, but couldn't dispel the feeling of failure that suffocated him. The decision about thunder weighed like a mountain on his shoulders. Would this surrender be the first of many? When the sky began to darken, Thomas went out again. A restlessness drove him outside, as if the house walls amplified his dark thoughts. He walked to the barn, where he kept the few tools he hadn't been forced to sell. The familiar smell of hay, leather, and earth brought a strange peace. Inside, he settled on a straw bale, watching through the open door as the sky began to dot with stars. There was no light pollution in this forgotten corner of the world, allowing the Milky Way to spread out in all its magnificence. His father used to say that those same stars had guided the first Mitchells to this land. "The sky brought us here, son, and it's what keeps us here. Never forget to look up when the ground seems uncertain." The ground had never been so uncertain as now. That's when he heard it. Distant at first, then increasingly clear, the roar of an engine cutting through the silence of the rural night. It wasn't common to receive visitors, especially at that hour. The road leading to Hope was used almost exclusively by Thomas on his rare trips to town to buy supplies. Intrigued, he got up and walked to the barn entrance. At first, he saw only a dust cloud illuminated by a single headlight. Then he distinguished the silhouette of a motorcycle, advancing erratically along the irregular road. Something was wrong. The bike seemed out of control, zigzagging dangerously. Thomas began to run toward the road, shouting for the driver to slow down. It was too late. The motorcycle skidded on a curve, and its rider was thrown off the road, falling with a dull thud onto the hardened earth. Without hesitation, Thomas ran to the accident victim. On the ground, illuminated only by the weak light of the crescent moon, lay the motionless body of a woman. His heart accelerated with fear of the worst scenario. He knelt beside her, looking for signs of life. To his relief, the stranger moaned. Softly, her eyes slowly opening. "Stay still," Thomas instructed with a firm but gentle voice. "How you might have fractures, I'll get help." "No." Her voice was surprisingly clear, despite the situation. "I'm fine. Just help me up." Ignoring her protest, Thomas carefully checked her neck and limbs, looking for signs of serious injuries. The woman wore clothes that seemed expensive: designer jeans, fine leather jacket, boots that certainly cost more than his monthly salary in the times when he could still get jobs in town. "I'm Thomas Mitchell," he introduced himself, helping her to sit up after confirming there were no obvious fractures. "This is my property. What are you doing driving alone on these roads at night?" She hesitated before answering, looking around as if to get her bearings. "Emily Parker," she finally responded. "I was exploring the region. I got lost." There was something rehearsed in her explanation, something that didn't convince Thomas. But who was he to judge others' secrets? "Your motorcycle needs repairs," he observed, examining the fallen vehicle. "And you need a doctor." "No." The response came quickly and emphatically. "No doctors or authorities, please. I just need a place to rest tonight. I'll sort everything out tomorrow." The mystery surrounding this woman deepened. Who runs from doctors after an accident? But again, everyone had their reasons, and rural hospitality didn't allow abandoning someone in need, no matter how suspicious the situation. "I have a simple house just over there," he pointed toward the ranch. "You can spend the night. Tomorrow we'll see what to do with your motorcycle." The relief on her face was visible. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I'll pay well for your hospitality." Thomas helped her to stand, noticing how she tried to disguise a grimace of pain. "Can you walk?" Emily took 2 steps and staggered, holding onto him to avoid falling. "I think I twisted my ankle." Without saying anything, Thomas whistled. Thunder, who was grazing nearby, approached with his elegant trot. "Come, he'll take us to the house." Emily's expression changed when she saw the magnificent chestnut horse. For a moment, Thomas saw something almost childlike light up her face. Genuine admiration. "He's beautiful," she murmured. "This is Thunder," he introduced with barely disguised pride, helping her to mount. "The last treasure of Hope Ranch." Surprise crossed her look. Hope, appropriate name. "It was once," Thomas replied, mounting behind her to ensure she wouldn't fall. "Now it's more irony than truth." As they rode slowly toward the house, Thomas couldn't help but notice how the stranger fit perfectly into that scenario, despite her urban and expensive clothes. There was a naturalness in how she sat on the horse, as if it wasn't the first time. The moon illuminated the path, casting elongated shadows of the rare trees that still resisted the drought. The night wind brought a slight aroma of earth and wild herbs, a fragrance that, for some reason, intensified the strange sensation that this encounter was not mere chance. "Do you have family, Mr. Mitchell?" The question caught him by surprise, breaking the comfortable silence that had established between them. "A sister in the city. And you?" Emily didn't answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from very far away. "Family is a complicated concept for me." Thomas didn't insist. Everyone had the right to their secrets, especially strangers who literally fell onto his property in the middle of the night. The house appeared before them, modest, yet welcoming under the starry sky. Thomas dismounted first, helping Emily down carefully. She leaned on him, putting weight on her injured ankle. "It's not much, but it's clean and safe," he said, opening the door. "Make yourself at home." Emily entered, her eyes quickly scanning the simple but well-kept environment. Her gaze lingered on the photographs, on the wall, then on the pile of collection letters on the table, partially covered by a local newspaper. She made no comments, but Thomas noticed that nothing escaped that attentive look. "I'll prepare something for us to eat. You must be hungry after all this." While Thomas busied himself in the kitchen, Emily limped to the living room, examining every detail of the house. For some reason, her presence didn't bother him. There was something genuine in her curiosity, as if she really cared about the history of that place, that family. "Has this ranch been in your family for a long time?" she asked, sitting at the kitchen table. "3 generations," he replied, placing in front of her a plate of dried meat with cassava, one of the few dishes he could still afford to prepare. "My grandfather started from scratch. My father expanded it, and I—" He hesitated, the weight of failure suddenly heavier. "I'm watching everything fall apart." Emily tasted the food with evident appreciation. "Why?" The question was simple, direct. There was no pity or judgment in her voice, just sincere curiosity. Perhaps because of that, or because of the absurdity of the situation, talking about his life with a stranger who had an accident in the middle of the night, Thomas found himself telling the complete story: the consecutive droughts, the fall in agricultural product prices, the loans to modernize the ranch that he never managed to repay, the relentless pursuit by the banks. "And now, I have 5 days to achieve a miracle, or I lose everything," he concluded, surprised by his own frankness. Emily observed him with disconcerting intensity. "And what do you plan to do?" Thomas looked out the window at the stable where Thunder now rested. "The only value I have left is out there. A buyer is interested in him." "The horse?" The indignation in her voice was palpable. "But he clearly means a lot to you." "Difficult choices require greater sacrifices," he replied with a resignation he didn't really feel. The idea of selling Thunder to Colonel Brandon still tore him apart inside. Emily finished eating in silence. There was an intensity in her contemplation that made Thomas wonder what was going on behind those enigmatic eyes. Finally, she spoke. "Thank you for the hospitality, Mr. Mitchell. I promise I'll compensate you adequately." "Thomas," he corrected, collecting the plates, "and you don't need to compensate anything. Hospitality has no price in these lands." Curious smile curved her lips. "Even on the verge of financial ruin, you maintain principles. Interesting." There was something in the way she said that, not as a superficial compliment but as an analytical observation, that intrigued him. Who was Emily Parker, really? "The guest room is prepared," he said, changing the subject. "It's simple but clean. Tomorrow we can look at your motorcycle and decide how to proceed." "You're very kind," she replied, standing carefully. "Good night, Thomas, and thank you for everything." When he finally lay in his own bed, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious visitor. There was something about her that didn't fit. The expensive clothes, the luxury motorcycle, the educated way of speaking contrasting with the refusal to seek medical help or authorities. Who was Emily Parker really? And what was she doing on that deserted road in the middle of the night? With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Thomas fell asleep, not knowing that fate had just changed the course of his life forever. The stranger that chance had brought carried with her much more than mysteries. She brought the possibility of redemption that he no longer dared to hope for. The first ray of sun found Thomas already up, following his usual routine. He went out to check on the animals, still drowsy, when an unexpected sight made him stop abruptly. In the yard in front of the house, Emily, wearing the same clothes as the night before but now with sleeves rolled up, was feeding the chickens with surprising naturalness. "Good morning," she greeted upon seeing him. "I hope you don't mind. I woke up early and wanted to make myself useful." The scene was so unusual that Thomas couldn't contain a smile. A woman in an Italian leather jacket throwing corn to country chickens. If the situation weren't so serious, it would be comical. "Impressive," he commented, approaching. "Most people from the city wouldn't know where to begin." Emily smiled, and there was something genuine in that smile that lit up her face in a way Thomas hadn't noticed the night before. "I'm not most people." That statement, Thomas realized, was probably more truthful than she intended to reveal. The days that followed brought an unexpected routine to Hope Ranch. Emily, contrary to all expectations, showed no rush to leave. Her motorcycle, which Thomas had brought from the accident site, remained abandoned next to the barn, awaiting repairs that neither seemed in a hurry to provide. "I've never met anyone from the city who knew so much about rural life," Thomas commented on the morning of the third day, as he watched Emily skillfully milk the only cow left on the property. Her fingers worked with precision and gentleness, as if she had done this all her life. "I have many hidden talents," she replied with an enigmatic smile, without diverting attention from her task. The milk spurted in rhythmic jets into the bucket, creating a creamy foam. "My grandmother had a small property in the countryside of Pennsylvania. I spent many summers there as a child." It was the first concrete personal information she had revealed since her arrival. Thomas absorbed that fragment of history with a curiosity that surprised him. Every small detail about Emily seemed precious, like pieces of a puzzle he was increasingly determined to solve. "And your parents?" he risked, testing the limits of the sudden openness. The rhythm of the milking didn't change, but an almost imperceptible shadow crossed Emily's face. Business people too busy to notice that their daughter preferred the smell of earth to that of air-conditioned offices. There was an untold story there, Thomas realized, an old wound perhaps. He decided not to push. "Secrets have their own time to reveal themselves," his father always said. "The bank's deadline expires tomorrow," he commented, changing the subject. The intrusive reality that he had momentarily forgotten in the company of this stranger now returned with full force. "I need to go to town today." Emily stopped milking, looking at him with a disconcerting intensity. "To sell thunder." The question hung between them, heavy as a storm cloud. Thomas looked away, unable to sustain the judgment he imagined seeing in her eyes. "I don't have a choice." "There are always choices, Thomas." She stood up, drying her hands on the improvised apron she wore over her expensive jeans. "Can I go?" "With you? I need to buy some things." The abrupt change of subject caught him off guard, but he nodded. "Sure, we'll leave in an hour." Emily smiled, that smile that was already becoming familiar, and that somehow illuminated even the darkest corners of the failing ranch. "Great, I'll finish here and get ready." As she walked away toward the house, Thomas couldn't help but notice how she had integrated perfectly into the rural landscape in just 3 days. Her delicate hands now exhibited small calluses, marks of honest work that she seemed to display with pride. Her face, previously pale, had gained a light tan from the sun. Even her way of walking seemed different, more connected to the earth, more present. Who was this woman really who appeared to be as comfortable feeding chickens as he suspected she would be in a 5-star restaurant? The trip to town normally took 40 minutes in Thomas's old pickup truck when it worked. That day, with the weak battery and the engine protesting at every curve, it took almost an hour. Emily didn't complain once, even when they had to push the vehicle up a steeper incline. On the contrary, she laughed at the situation with a contagious lightness that made Thomas wonder when was the last time he had laughed like that. The small town of Green Valley welcomed them with its usual afternoon drowsiness. A single traffic light regulated the almost non-existent traffic. Traditional businesses displayed facades faded by time, and elderly gentlemen occupied the benches in the central square, commenting on others' lives with the authority of those who have seen it all. "Charming," Emily commented, observing everything with genuine interest as they walked down the main street. Her ankle, although still bandaged, already allowed her to walk without limping much. "Charming is a kind word for forgotten by progress," Thomas replied, but without bitterness. There was genuine affection for that place that saw him grow up despite everything. They stopped in front of the town's only bank, a two-story building more imposing than the other establishments. Thomas hesitated, the weight of the decision he was about to make suddenly unbearable. "You don't have to do this," Emily said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "There must be another solution." "What?" The question came out harsher than he intended. "Disappear like so many other farmers? Declare bankruptcy? Hand over my ancestors' land to some conglomerate that will transform it into a soybean? Monoculture?" Emily didn't retreat in the face of his frustration. "Meet me at Mrs. Mary's cafe in an hour," she said simply, pointing to a small diner across the street. "I need to resolve some things." Before he could question, she was already walking away, heading with determination toward the town's only hotel. There was something different in her posture now, a natural authority that didn't match the image of the unpretentious young woman who had helped with the milking hours before. With a resigned sigh, Thomas entered the bank. The freezing air conditioning contrasted drastically with the stifling heat outside, causing him an involuntary shiver, or perhaps it was just the anticipation of what was to come. Ryan Taylor, the manager, received him with an icy formality that barely disguised his contempt. At 35, with a degree in business administration from a second-tier private university, Taylor represented everything Thomas despised: ambition without purpose, power without responsibility, success built on others' failure. "Mr. Mitchell," he greeted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've come to address your situation." "I came to negotiate," Thomas replied, maintaining dignity despite the condescending treatment. "I need more time." Taylor let out a theatrical sigh, feigning regret. "Unfortunately, Mr. Mitchell, the bank has already been more than generous with your extensions. The market doesn't wait, you understand? We have investors, shareholders. I have a buyer interested in my horse?" Thomas interrupted, hating every word that came out of his mouth. "I can make a partial payment now and pay off the rest in 90 days. The manager consulted the computer screen, pretending to analyze numbers he probably already knew by heart. "I'm afraid that's not enough. The accumulated debt, the interest, unless your horse is worth about $200,000. He laughed at his own unfunny joke. "Colonel Brandon offered 30,000, Thomas replied, feeling his stomach churn just pronouncing those words. "I can deliver 20,000 as a down payment." "The Colonel, is it?" Taylor suddenly seemed interested. "Well, that changes things a bit. He's an important customer." Thomas felt the bitter taste of understanding. Of course he was. Brandon probably financed his enormous properties through that same bank, maybe even had some agreement to acquire lands from defaulting debtors. The feeling of being in a carefully planned trap was suffocating. "So can we negotiate?" he insisted, swallowing his pride. Taylor made a thoughtful expression. "I can convince the board to accept the partial payment, but we'll have to reduce the term. 30 days, not 90. It was impossible. Even selling every inch of land, every animal, every tool, Thomas couldn't get the full amount in just 1 month. Taylor knew this. It was just a cruel game, a charade to maintain the appearances of fair negotiation. 45 days, he tried, knowing it was futile. 30, Taylor repeated, his smile now blatantly triumphant. "Take it or leave it, Mr. Mitchell." Thomas felt the world spin. It was the end. Even selling Thunder, he would only postpone the inevitable for a month. After that, he would lose everything anyway. "I'll think about it," he managed to say, rising with trembling legs. "Don't take too long," Taylor advised, already turning his attention back to the computer. "Colonel Brandon is not known for his patience, and there are other interested parties in your property." He left the bank feeling sick. The merciless afternoon sun seemed to mock his despair, impartially illuminating both the mansions of prosperous ranchers and the decaying establishments of small merchants, all struggling to survive in an economy that favored only the big players. He walked like an automaton to the cafe indicated by Emily, barely registering the movement of the streets or the occasional greetings from acquaintances. His mind was trapped in an endless cycle of impossible calculations and increasingly desolate scenarios. Mrs. Mary's cafe was a simple but welcoming establishment. Checkered tablecloths covered the wooden tables, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with that of homemade bread. On any other day, that familiar environment would have comforted Thomas. Today, however, it only amplified his sense of imminent loss. Emily was already waiting for him, seated at a corner table, an untouched cup of coffee in front of her. There was something different about her. The simple rural work clothes had been replaced by an elegant outfit that even to untrained eyes like Thomas's seemed absurdly expensive. Her hair, previously tied in a practical ponytail, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Even more surprising was the open laptop in front of her, a state-of-the-art model that seemed out of place in that provincial cafe. "What happened?" she asked as soon as Thomas sat down. There was no need to pretend everything was fine. His face must have been displaying all the desolation he felt. "The expected," he replied bitterly. "I'm cornered." Emily observed him for a long moment, her penetrating eyes as if evaluating not just the man in front of her, but the whole situation, all the variables, all the possible outcomes. "What if I told you there's an alternative?" she finally asked, her voice calm and calculated. Thomas laughed without humor. "Unless you have $200,000 hidden in that expensive purse, I don't see an alternative." The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Emily didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't give any indication that it was a joke. Slowly, understanding began to form in Thomas's mind. "Wait. You're not suggesting—" The words died in his throat. Emily closed the laptop with a smooth movement. "I think it's time we were completely honest with each other, Thomas Mitchell." Leaning forward, she continued, her voice low enough not to be heard by the neighboring tables. "My name is Emily Parker Harrison. I'm the CEO of the Harrison Investment Group." The name hit Thomas like lightning. Harrison Group, one of the largest business conglomerates in the country, with operations in dozens of sectors, from financial to agribusiness, the type of company he had always blamed for the situation of small farmers like himself. Incredulity prevented him from forming complete sentences. "Yes, I am what you call a billionaire," she confirmed, without arrogance, just stating a fact. "Although I prefer the term resource administrator." Thomas's head was spinning. The woman who had helped feed chickens, who had milked his cow, who had slept in his simple guest room without a single complaint, was one of the richest and most powerful people in the country. Why, was all he could ask. Why lie? Why stay at my ranch? Why all this? Emily, or whoever she really was, rested her elbows on the table, interlacing her fingers under her chin. "I didn't lie, I just omitted. And as for why—" A sigh escaped her lips. "It's a long story. The short version? I'm tired of seeing people like you lose everything to people like Ryan Taylor." The name of the bank manager on her lips was like an electric shock. "You know him?" A humorless smile curved her lips. "I know the type. Small men with small powers, destroying lives to impress superiors who barely know they exist." Despite the surreal situation, Thomas couldn't help but appreciate the precision of that description. Still, none of this made sense. "What do you want from me after all?" Suspicion was beginning to replace the initial surprise. In his experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Emily, he still couldn't think of her as Mrs. Harrison, looked out the window, observing the central square of the small town. When she turned to face him again, there was a determination in her eyes that wasn't there before. "I want to propose a deal." Her voice now had the firmness of someone accustomed to closing million-dollar deals. "My company is looking for land in this region for a new project, a rehabilitation sanctuary for horses rescued from mistreatment." Thomas blinked, certain he had misunderstood. "A sanctuary for horses?" "Exactly." The passion in her voice was unmistakable. "Not a profitable business in the traditional sense, but a social and environmental responsibility project. And your ranch," she made a significant pause, "has the perfect size, the ideal location, and an owner who, from what I've observed, in the last few days, shares values similar to mine when it comes to animal welfare." Thomas's head was spinning with possibilities. Was it a way out, a trap, a crazy dream from which he would wake up at any moment? "What's the proposal exactly?" he asked, trying to gain time to organize his chaotic thoughts. Emily opened the elegant leather folder that rested next to the laptop and slid a document across the table. "I want to buy your debt from the bank. Not the ranch, the debt. You will continue to be the owner, but you'll owe me, not them." Thomas examined the preliminary contract, trying to absorb the terms. "And why should I exchange one creditor for another?" Her smile now was genuine, almost conspiratorial. "Because my terms are infinitely better. Minimum interest rate, 10-year term, and most importantly, you will be hired as the project manager, with a salary compatible with the market. The ranch will continue to be yours, but the sanctuary will operate in partnership." It was too good to be true. There had to be a catch. "And what do you gain from this?" "An excellent local administrator with deep knowledge of the region, a pilot project for what I hope will become a national network of sanctuaries, and," she hesitated briefly, "the satisfaction of frustrating Colonel Brandon's plans, who, coincidentally, has been a thorn in my side in other businesses." That made more sense. The business world was like that. Strategic alliances, revenge disguised as philanthropy, power against power. Still, the proposal was a miracle fallen from heaven, literally. "Why me?" He couldn't avoid the question. "Why not buy any other ranch in the region? There must be dozens for sale in better condition than mine." Emily looked at him for a long time before answering, as if pondering how much of herself she was willing to reveal. "Because when I saw you that night offering your only valuable asset to help a stranger, I noticed something rare." Her voice had a vulnerability that contrasted with the image of a powerful executive. "Integrity, the same I saw in my grandfather, who started as a simple farmer and built an empire without ever losing his values." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken meanings, unexpected connections, possibilities that previously seemed unattainable. "So," she finally asked, "do we have a deal?" Thomas looked out the window, at the town he had known since childhood, at the sky that covered the lands his family had cultivated for generations. Then he faced that extraordinary woman that fate had placed in his path in the most unlikely manner. "When do we start?" he replied, extending his hand. The handshake that sealed that agreement was much more than a business gesture. It was the beginning of an unlikely partnership, a nascent friendship, and perhaps, although neither dared to admit it at that moment, something much deeper. On the return to the ranch, now in Emily's comfortable rental car, Thomas felt as if he had awakened from a long nightmare. They left the bank with the debt transferred to the Harrison Group, leaving behind a stunned Ryan Taylor, faced with the sudden appearance of one of the most powerful women in the country in his provincial agency. "The look on his face when you walked in was priceless," Thomas commented, allowing himself a genuine smile for the first time in months. Emily laughed, a crystalline sound that seemed to illuminate the interior of the vehicle. "He almost choked when I presented my card. I bet he's at this exact moment frantically calling his superiors, trying to understand what happened. And Colonel Brandon, he won't be happy when he finds out." An enigmatic expression crossed Emily's face. "Leave Brandon to me. I have some trumps saved to deal with him." There was an unshakable confidence in that woman who, until a few days ago, Thomas believed was just a lost motorcyclist. Now he saw her for what she really was, a force of nature in human form, determined and relentless when deciding on a course of action. Why hide who you were? He couldn't avoid the question that had been bothering him since the revelation. Why pretend to be as an ordinary person? Emily turned her attention to the road ahead, but Thomas noticed a momentary vulnerability in her profile. Because I wanted to see how you would treat me. The answer came low, almost a whisper. In my position, I rarely know if people are kind to me for the person I am or for the power I have. The simplicity of that confession touched Thomas deeply. Behind the powerful CEO, the merciless billionaire in business, there was a woman seeking genuine connections in a world where everything had a price. And what did you discover? He asked, genuinely curious. A soft smile curved her lips. I discovered a man who would give his last treasure to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. The kind of person who has become rare in this world. The warmth that rose to Thomas's face had nothing to do with the sun. Something was being born there, between these two people so different and at the same time so complementary. Something fragile and powerful, frightening and comforting. Something that no contract could foresee or regulate. When they arrived at Hope Ranch, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. In the stable, Thunder whinnied upon hearing the car approach. For Thomas, that familiar sound now had a new meaning, no longer a reminder of the imminent sacrifice, but the symbol of an unexpected new beginning. Welcome to Hope Ranch, he said, to Emily with a renewed smile. This time the name finally makes sense. And as they walked side by side toward the simple house that now seemed full of possibilities, Thomas realized that true hope wasn't in the land, the animals, or the contracts. It was in the human capacity to transform casual encounters into deep connections, to convert despair into purpose, to see value where others see only failure. Night fell over the ranch, but for the first time in years, it didn't bring with it the darkness of despair. On the contrary, under the starry mantle of the countryside, a new light began to shine, the light of two lonely hearts that, against all odds, found in each other something they didn't even know they were looking for. 6 months had passed since that fateful afternoon in town. Hope Ranch, previously on the verge of collapse, now pulsated with a renewed life that no one could have predicted. The Horse Sanctuary project had quickly transformed from a dream into a vibrant reality. The fields that previously dried under the merciless sun now displayed a healthy green, thanks to the sustainable irrigation system implemented under Emily's supervision. The old abandoned sheds had been renovated and transformed into modern stables, designed to offer maximum comfort to the rescued animals. A small veterinary clinic, equipped with cutting-edge technology, occupied the space where the old barn used to be. Even more impressive was the transformation of the main house. Maintaining its original rustic charm, it now combined modern comfort with traditional architecture, a perfect reflection of the unlikely partnership between Thomas and Emily. That Saturday morning, Thomas observed from the newly built porch as the newest inhabitant of the sanctuary was unloaded from the specially adapted trailer. A spotted horse, visibly malnourished and with evident scars of mistreatment, resisted the caretakers with the typical fear of one who has only known human cruelty. "He'll need time," Emily commented, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Thomas and positioned herself next to him, their shoulders almost touching. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. "How is Thunder handling his new mentor role?" Thomas asked, gratefully accepting the coffee. The chestnut horse, previously the only horse on the ranch, now enjoyed a special status as the sanctuary's ambassador. His gentle and patient nature made him perfect for helping the new rescues adapt. Emily smiled, her eyes following Thunder, who was carefully approaching the fence where the new horse had been placed. Like a true diplomat, patient, respectful, but firm when necessary, he has a natural gift. Like his owner, Thomas replied, allowing himself the affectionate comment that months ago he would never have dared to make. The blush that colored Emily's cheeks was reward enough. Their relationship had evolved slowly, built on mutual respect and growing admiration. Professionally, they formed a perfect team. Thomas's practical knowledge of the land complemented Emily's strategic vision and resources. Personally, well, that was still in an undefined territory, dancing on the border between deep friendship and something more. "The TV crew arrives at 2, Emily reminded, consulting the elegant watch on her wrist. "Our first national report about the sanctuary." Thomas nodded, a twinge of nervousness manifesting in his stomach. He still wasn't completely comfortable with all the attention the project had been receiving. In recent weeks, journalists from regional publications had visited the ranch, resulting in enthusiastic articles about the pioneering initiative. Now, a national television channel would do a special report, definitely putting Hope Ranch on the map. "Do you really think people will be interested in rescued horses?" he asked, still insecure despite the evidence to the contrary. Emily placed her hand on his arm, a reassuring gesture that sent a familiar warmth through Thomas's body. "You'd be surprised how many people care when someone shows them how to care. That's why this project is so important, not just for the animals we save, but for the example we establish." It was this ability to see beyond the immediate, to see the transformative potential of small actions, that most impressed Thomas about Emily. Where he saw a recovered ranch and some rescued horses, she envisioned the beginning of a cultural change, an educational opportunity, a replicable model. "Have the guests for the benefit event confirmed their attendance?" he asked, referring to the big fundraising dinner scheduled for the following month. It would be the first event of its kind held at the ranch, bringing together business people, celebrities, and potential donors. "Almost all, including some you'll recognize from television," Emily replied with an enigmatic smile. "Chef Gabriel Mendoza also confirmed he'll personally prepare the dinner." Thomas whistled softly, impressed. Gabriel Mendoza was one of the most famous chefs in the country, with starred restaurants and TV shows. "How did you manage to convince him?" "I didn't have to. When he learned the dinner would be to raise funds for the sanctuary, he offered himself." The pride in Emily's voice was palpable. "People want to be part of something meaningful, Thomas. They just need the opportunity." Emily's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She checked the screen and frowned. "I need to answer. It's the office in Chicago." As she walked away to speak in private, Thomas contemplated the changes in his life. 6 months ago, he was about to lose everything. Now he was the official manager of Hope Sanctuary, with a generous salary, a dedicated team under his supervision, and most importantly, a renewed purpose. And there was Emily, the extraordinary woman who entered his life like a tornado, challenging all his expectations and prejudices. Of course, not everything had been easy. Colonel Brandon, furious at having lost the opportunity to acquire the Mitchell lands, had tried to sabotage the project in various ways, from spreading malicious rumors in the community to pressuring local politicians against granting necessary licenses. But he underestimated Emily's determination and the influence network of the Harrison Group. Each obstacle was overcome with a combination of legal resources, genuine community support, and, when necessary, a subtle demonstration of the economic power that Emily could mobilize. The local community, initially skeptical, soon embraced the project upon realizing the tangible benefits: new jobs, increased tourism, valorization of local culture and traditions. The sanctuary's educational program, which regularly received visits from schools in the region, was helping to create a new generation aware of animal welfare and environmental conservation. Even Martha, Thomas's sister, who had always insisted he abandon the ranch, had changed her mind after her first visit. "I never thought I'd say this," she had confessed, visibly moved upon seeing the transformation of the property, "but I'm proud of what you've built here." "Of what we've built," Thomas had corrected, with a significant look at Emily, who was supervising the construction of the new visitor center. The memory brought a smile to his face. Perhaps the most surprising of all was how Emily's vision for the sanctuary aligned perfectly with the values his father had always defended: respect for the land, care for animals, work with purpose beyond immediate profit. It was as if Mitchell had somehow guided that extraordinary woman to his door on that fateful night. Emily returned, a concerned expression clouding her habitually serene countenance. "Problems in paradise?" Thomas asked, immediately attentive. She hesitated, something rare for someone normally so direct. "We need to talk, Thomas." The serious tone triggered an internal alarm. Did something happen with the sanctuary, with the funding? No, nothing like that. She made a vague gesture with her hand. "The project is more solid than ever. It's—" Significant pause. "Something personal?" A chill ran down Thomas's spine. During the last months they had developed a comfortable routine. Emily divided her time between the ranch and her company headquarters in Chicago, but lately spent increasingly more time at Hope. The guest house, initially renovated for her stays, remained practically unused since, after a particularly violent storm, she had spent the night in the main house and, somehow, never returned. To the other accommodation. They hadn't put labels on whatever was growing between them. It was a silent understanding, a careful dance between two cautious individuals, both carrying their own scars. But now, something had changed. The fear of losing her hit Thomas with an intensity that surprised him. "Let's go inside," he suggested, keeping his voice controlled despite the growing apprehension. In the spacious living room, with its harmonious mixture of restored antique furniture and contemporary pieces selected by Emily, they sat face to face. Silence weighed between them for a few moments. "I received a proposal," Emily finally began. "An important opportunity for the Harrison Group, an international project that would require my presence in London for at least 6 months. London. 6 months. The words fell like stones in Thomas's stomach. "I understand," he managed to say, although he understood nothing. 6 months was an eternity. "It's a partnership with one of the largest conservation organizations in Europe. It would significantly expand the reach of our work here, bring new techniques, international funding." She spoke quickly, as if trying to convince herself as much as him. "It sounds like a great opportunity," Thomas replied mechanically. When would you leave?" Emily looked at her own hands, an unusual gesture of insecurity. "In 2 weeks, ideally." 2 weeks. The benefit dinner wouldn't even have happened yet. The pain of the imminent separation was almost physical. "The sanctuary," he began, clinging to practical issues like an anchor amid the emotional storm, "will continue to function exactly as it is," she quickly assured. "You remain in charge, with full autonomy. The current team stays intact. The funding is guaranteed. Nothing changes operationally. Except everything," Thomas thought. Everything would change without her here. "You've already decided to go," he stated, not as an accusation, but as a recognition of reality. Emily raised her gaze, her eyes, meeting his with an intensity that left him breathless. "No, that's why we're having this conversation. She hesitated, something rare for her. "I need to know what you think, what you feel." The moment of truth had arrived, Thomas realized. Months of undeclared feelings, of cautious touches, of significant looks, everything culminated in this instant. "I think you should go," he finally said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "It's an important opportunity for your work, for your vision. It would be selfish of me to ask you to stay." The disappointment on her face was instantaneous and unequivocal. "I understand," she replied, retreating slightly. "It's the most logical decision, certainly." "I'm not finished," Thomas continued, leaning forward. "I think you should go, but I also think we should clarify what's happening between us before you go." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "And what is happening between us, Thomas Mitchell?" It was now or never. Months of repressed emotions finally overflowed into words. "I'm in love with you, Emily. Probably since that first morning I found you feeding the chickens as if you'd done it all your life. And I suspect, I hope, you feel something similar for me." The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but seemed like an eternity. Then unexpectedly Emily smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her face like the sunrise illuminates the countryside after a night of storm. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and joy. "I thought you'd never say it." Before he could fully process what was happening, she had moved to his side on the sofa, her hands finding his with a familiarity that seemed at once new and ancient. "I'm in love with you too," she confessed, the vulnerability in her voice contrasting with the confident CEO the world knew. "And that's why this decision is so difficult. For the first time in my life, my heart and my career are pulling in different directions." Thomas felt a wave of tenderness for this extraordinary woman, so powerful in so many aspects, and yet so human in her confession. "They don't need to be in conflict," he said softly. "London isn't the end of the world. There are planes, video calls. Long-distance relationships rarely work," she argued, the pragmatic CEO momentarily overriding the woman in love. "Normal relationships, maybe," Thomas agreed. "But since when are we normal? A billionaire who milks cows and a failed rancher, who now runs an international horse sanctuary. We've broken all the rules from the beginning." Her laugh was like music, spontaneous, clear, liberating. "You have a valid point. Besides," he continued encouraged, 6 months pass quickly, and who knows, maybe I could visit you. I've never left the United States. It would be a good opportunity to see the world." Emily stared at him with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You would do that? Leave the ranch to visit me?" "The ranch has been here for 3 generations and will continue to be here," he replied with conviction. "Some opportunities, some people, appear once in a lifetime. I don't intend to let them slip away." Something changed in her look, a decision being made, a resolution solidifying. "I have a counter-proposal," she said, her tone returning to that of the confident negotiator he had met in that cafe in town 6 months ago. "What if, instead of 6 continuous months, I negotiated alternating stays? 2 weeks there, 2 weeks here. It would be more exhausting for me, but we would be together," Thomas completed, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude. "Are you sure it would work for the project?" "I'll make it work," she replied with the determination that was her trademark. "After all, I am the CEO. I have some influence in the decisions." They laughed together, the tension finally dissipated. It was so typical of Emily, finding a creative solution where others would see only insurmountable obstacles. It was one of the infinite qualities that made him love her more each day. "So we're officially—" Thomas left the sentence open, a territory not yet completely mapped. "Together," she completed simply. "We're together, Thomas Mitchell, and I intend to continue this way for a long, long time." As if to seal that promise, Emily leaned in and, finally, her lips met Thomas's in the kiss that both had imagined and avoided for months. It was like coming home and embarking on a great adventure at the same time. When they separated, breathless and smiling like teenagers, the world seemed different, brighter, more full of possibilities. Outside, in the verdant field, Thunder had achieved a rapprochement with the newly rescued horse. The 2 animals now grazed side by side, a silent symbol that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the ones that transform us the most. "You know what this means?" Emily asked, a playful gleam in her eyes. "What?" "That we have quite a story to tell in that TV interview this afternoon." They laughed together, their fingers intertwined like their lives now were, a billionaire who had found her roots and a rancher who had discovered his wings, building together a future that neither could have imagined 6 months before. And as the midday sun bathed Hope Ranch with its golden light, the promise of that name was finally fulfilled in all possible ways. The big day of the benefit event had arrived. Hope Ranch, illuminated by hundreds of lanterns strategically distributed throughout the newly landscaped gardens, seemed like something out of a rural fairy tale. Tables elegantly decorated with arrangements of local wildflowers were arranged under an immense white tent, specially erected for the occasion. In the background, a small orchestra played classical compositions blended with regional rhythms, creating a unique atmosphere that reflected the very essence of the sanctuary, the harmonious union between seemingly distinct worlds. Thomas, wearing a custom-made suit that Emily had insisted on giving him, observed the growing movement of luxury vehicles arriving along the main road, now paved and lined with torches that guided the way. Influential business people, celebrities, politicians, journalists, the kind of people who a year ago he would have considered part of a universe completely alien to his own. Nervous? Emily's familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. She appeared at his side, stunning in a long dress that combined urban sophistication with elements of country culture, another symbol of the bridge they were building together between worlds. "A little," he admitted, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. "I never imagined I would be receiving the country's elite at my parents' ranch." Emily smiled, that smile that still accelerated his heart, even after all these months. "They're not as intimidating as they seem. In fact, most are more nervous than you. Hard to believe." "It's true," she insisted, delicately adjusting the lapel of his jacket. "They're in unfamiliar territory, far from their controlled environments. You, on the other hand, are at home." The observation was typical of Emily, insightful and comforting at the same time. In recent months, Thomas had learned to value this ability of hers to invert perspectives, to find strength where others would see weakness. "Besides," she continued, her hand discreetly finding his, "we're in this together, like in everything." The warmth of that simple contact spread through his body, bringing the confidence he needed. Yes, they were together. The unlikely couple who had transformed a failing ranch into a model of conservation and animal welfare, recognized internationally. In the 2 weeks since they had formalized their relationship, much had changed. Emily had completely reorganized her schedule for the project in London, achieving an arrangement that would allow alternating stays of 3 weeks instead of the original continuous absence of 6. The board of directors of the Harrison Group, initially skeptical about the unconventional arrangement, eventually yielded, partly due to Emily's unwavering determination, partly due to the unquestionable success that Hope Sanctuary represented for the company's image. The repercussion of the television report about the sanctuary had exceeded all expectations. The story of the rancher on the verge of ruin and the executive who transformed his destiny captured the national public's imagination. More importantly, the focus on the rescued horses and the innovative conservation model generated a wave of support and donations that guaranteed the expansion of the project far beyond the initial planning. "I think it's time to receive our guests," Emily suggested, indicating the arrival of a particularly imposing limousine. "That must be the Secretary of the Interior." Thomas took a deep breath, adjusting his posture. "Let's go." The following 2 hours were a whirlwind of introductions, quick conversations, and explanations about the sanctuary's functioning. To his surprise, Thomas found himself completely at ease in that role. He spoke with genuine passion about the work they were doing, about the transformation of the rescued animals, about the impact on the local community, and he noticed, with a growing amazement, the sincere respect in the eyes of those powerful people when he shared his knowledge about the land and animals, knowledge that no MBA or fortune could buy. Emily circulated through the event with the natural grace of someone born to that world, but always returned to his side at crucial moments, introducing him not as an employee or business partner, but as her equal, her companion in all senses. The message was clear to everyone. Hope Sanctuary was not just another corporate social responsibility project. It was the result of a genuine partnership, personal and professional. When everyone was seated for dinner, masterfully prepared by Chef Gabriel Mendoza using local ingredients, Emily rose for the official speech. The animated conversation immediately silenced. All attention turned to the woman many considered a visionary in business. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her clear and confident voice filling the space. "It is with immense joy that Thomas and I welcome you to Hope Ranch." The simple fact that she began with Thomas and I, and not with mentions of her company or the corporate project, did not go unnoticed. It was a subtle but unequivocal declaration. A year ago, if someone had told me I would be here, in this place with these people doing this work, I would have questioned their sanity. A wave of soft laughter traveled through the audience, but life has an interesting way of guiding us exactly where we need to be, even when we think we're lost. Her gaze found Thomas's in the crowd, a silent but deep connection. Hope Sanctuary was born from an unlikely encounter, An accident that I now know was the happiest of accidents. When my motorcycle skidded on that dirt road, I was literally lost, not just geographically, but in many other ways. Emily's personal confession, something rare for someone generally so reserved about her private life, captured the complete attention of those present. Many of the guests only knew her public persona, the brilliant executive, the heiress who had multiplied the family fortune, the merciless businesswoman in negotiations. Seeing this other side was a revelation. I found in this ranch not just shelter for a night, but a lesson about what really matters. I saw a man about to lose everything he loved, but who still offered his last valuable asset, that magnificent chestnut horse you met today, to help a stranger. Thomas felt the heat rise to his face, unaccustomed to being the center of attention. Some looks turned to him, no longer with the initial curiosity about the country boy who won the Billionaire, but with genuine respect. What began as a business project transformed into a mission. We don't just save horses here, we save a form of connection with the land, with animals, and among us humans, that is becoming increasingly rare in our accelerated world. Emily paused, her eyes scanning the attentive audience before continuing. In the coming weeks, I'll be dividing my time between here and London, where we'll expand the Hope Sanctuary model internationally. It is with immense joy that I announce tonight that it will not just be a local project, but the first step of a global network of sanctuaries, connecting rural communities, rescued animals, and conscious investors in a new form of sustainable conservation. Enthusiastic applause interrupted her speech. The international expansion was news even to some of the board members present. Emily waited for the buzz to diminish before making the announcement that Thomas knew was the true purpose of the night. And to lead this global effort, I could not choose a more capable person than Thomas Mitchell. She extended her hand in his direction, inviting him to join her. No longer as sanctuary manager, but as international director of operations of the newly created Hope Foundation. A shock ran through Thomas. This part wasn't in the plans, or at least not in the plans she had shared with him. International Director, Foundation. The terms seemed surreal applied to him, a simple rancher who until a year ago could barely keep the family property. With slightly trembling legs he rose and walked to Emily, aware of the evaluating looks that followed him. Upon reaching her side, she took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his in a gesture that eliminated any doubt about the nature of their relationship. Thomas represents the best of the American rural soul, she continued, her gaze now fixed on him instead of the audience. Integrity, resilience, deep knowledge of the land and animals, and an infinite capacity for adaptation. Together, we'll build bridges between the countryside and the city, between tradition and innovation, between preservation and progress. The applause that followed was deafening. Thomas, still processing the surprising announcement, noticed something extraordinary. Those people, powerful, influential, rich, were applauding while standing. They were applauding not just the project or Emily, but him too. They were applauding the unlikely union that had created something truly transformative. "You could have warned me," he murmured, when the noise diminished enough for them to talk. Without being overheard, Emily smiled, that smile that combined mischief and determination. "And miss the expression on your face?" "Never." "International Director," he repeated, testing the strange words. "That means—" "It means you'll come with me to London," she completed. "Not as a visitor, but as a full partner in the project. The ranch will remain under Miguel's care as local manager. He's more than ready. We need you there, Thomas. I need you there." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and electrifying. Leaving the ranch, even if temporarily. Knowing another country, another culture, representing the project internationally. So many firsts condensed into a single decision. "I'm afraid," he admitted, with the honesty that always characterized their relationship. "Afraid of not being up to it, of disappointing you, of discovering there's a whole world beyond this ranch," she completed softly. "A world that can welcome you as completely as this land always has." As always, Emily saw to the heart of the matter. The real fear wasn't of failing, but of succeeding, of discovering that his identity, so deeply rooted in that land, could flourish in other soils, under other skies. "You won't be abandoning your roots," she assured, as if reading his thoughts. "You'll be expanding your horizons, and we'll always return." The promise in her voice was unmistakable. It wasn't just about the project or the work. It was about them, about the future they were building together, about the life they had inadvertently begun to plan. "So, Mr. Mitchell," she teased, with a smile as the waiters began to serve the elaborate dinner, "do you accept the position?" The answer came not in words, but in a kiss, brief, respectful considering the formal environment, but unequivocal in its meaning. The spontaneous applause that followed brought a blush to the faces of both, but also the confirmation that their unusual story touched something universal in everyone's heart. The dinner proceeded in an atmosphere of celebration and optimism. Chef Gabriel Mendoza exceeded all expectations, creating dishes that combined sophisticated techniques with humble local ingredients, another unintentional metaphor for the very essence of Hope Sanctuary. While animated conversations flowed around the tables, Thomas couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he was sitting alone at the kitchen table, contemplating the pile of collection letters and the devastating possibility of selling Thunder. Now, he was surrounded by some of the most influential people in the country, about to embark on an international adventure alongside the most extraordinary woman he had ever met. The night was advancing when Ricardo Lima, one of the most respected environmentalists in the country and newly appointed member of the Hope Foundation board, proposed a toast. "To Emily and Thomas," he said, raising his glass, "for reminding us that the greatest transformations begin not with large corporate plans, but with genuine encounters between people who allow themselves to see beyond appearances." The glasses clinked, reflecting the soft light of the lanterns. In the moment of silence that followed the toast, the distant sound of a whinny reached them, thunder, as if also wanting to participate in the celebration. "I think he approves," Emily commented, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "He's always been a wise horse," Thomas replied, feeling a wave of gratitude for everything and everyone who had led him to this moment. Hours later, when the last guest had departed and silence reigned again at the ranch, Emily and Thomas walked hand in hand to the main stable. On the large illuminated board at the entrance, photos of all the horses rescued so far, 27 in total, told silent stories of suffering transformed into hope. "It was an absolute success," Emily commented, leaning on Thomas's shoulder as they contemplated the images. "The donations exceeded our most optimistic expectations. The foundation is officially launched." "Thanks to you," he replied, embracing her with his arm. "Your vision, your contacts, your determination." "Our vision," she corrected firmly. "It wouldn't have meaning without your knowledge, your connection to this land, your authenticity that won over even the most skeptical." Thomas smiled, still marveling at her ability to see in him qualities that he himself took so long to recognize. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," Emily confirmed, turning to face him. In the soft moonlight entering through the stable windows, her face had an almost ethereal quality. "And I have one more surprise for you." Thomas raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "More surprises? I'm not sure my heart can handle it." With a mysterious smile, Emily led him to a more remote area of the stable, where a door led to a space that had been recently renovated. "Close your eyes," she asked. Obeying, Thomas felt himself guided into the room. The smell of new wood and fresh paint mingled with something familiar that he couldn't immediately identify. "You can open now," she said softly. What he saw left him speechless. The old stable office had been completely transformed into a space that was simultaneously a museum and a memorial. On the walls, carefully framed, were the black and white photographs of the Mitchell family that previously decorated the main house. His grandfather, with the first tractor, his father in front of the abundant harvest, his mother in an apron surrounded by workers. In the center, in special highlight, the photograph that meant so much to him, Thomas at 12, mounted on his first horse, with his father at his side, proud. Below the photo, a polished brass plaque displayed the words, "In memory of Joseph Mitchell, whose values of respect for the land and animals inspired Hope Sanctuary." "Emily," emotion choked his voice, preventing him from continuing. "This is the Joseph Mitchell Center for Rural Memory," she explained, her own voice soft with contained emotion. "It will be part of the sanctuary's educational circuit. The stories of your family, of the farmers of this region, of the traditions we cannot lose, all preserved for future generations." Thomas slowly toured the space, noting the meticulous details. Ancient tools restored and identified, historical documents of the region protected in showcases, a timeline showing the evolution of Hope Ranch from its foundation to its transformation into a sanctuary. "How did you accomplish all this?" he asked, marveling at the historical precision and the evident care in every detail. "I had help," Emily admitted. "Your sister Martha contributed many pieces of information and photographs. The oldest residents of the region shared stories. The historian from the State University supervised the assembly of the exhibition." "It's perfect," he finally managed to say, emotion still making it difficult to speak. "My father. He would be so proud." "He would be proud of you, Thomas," Emily replied, approaching to take his hands in hers, "for maintaining your integrity, even in the most difficult moments, for not giving up on the land, for transforming Hope into something even greater than he could imagine." In that moment, surrounded by the memories of his past and beside the woman who represented his future, Thomas felt a circle closing. The legacy of his family would not end with him, as he had feared during those desperate days before Emily's arrival. On the contrary, it would gain new dimensions, would reach people he could never have imagined. "I love you," he said simply, words that had become frequent between them in recent months, but that at that moment carried a special weight. The recognition that what they felt for each other transcended common romance. It was a partnership in all possible senses, a union of purposes, values, and visions that together created something greater than the sum of its parts. "I love you too," she replied, her eyes shining with contained tears. "Thank you for teaching me that success without purpose is empty, that power without connection is useless, that all the wealth in the world is worth nothing compared to the wealth of making a difference." Under the silent gaze of Thomas's ancestors, whose photographs witnessed that moment of union between past and future, they sealed with a kiss the promise of a shared path, a path that would lead from the American countryside to international conservation halls, from deep roots to newly discovered wings. Outside, under the starry sky that had guided generations of Mitchells to that land, the rescued horses rested peacefully in their renovated stables. Thunder, the unwitting catalyst of this entire story, grazed peacefully under the moonlight, as free as he always should have been. And Hope Ranch, revitalized and reimagined, pulsated with the promise of a future where tradition and innovation, simplicity and sophistication, roots and wings could coexist in perfect harmony. The story of the rancher and the billionaire, which began as a casual encounter on a dusty road, had transformed into a narrative of redemption, purpose, and love that would inspire generations. A reminder that sometimes it is precisely when we believe we have lost everything that destiny presents us with the opportunity to gain something even greater. Dear listeners, we hope that Thomas and Emily's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special collection with equally captivating stories about encounters that transform lives. You can find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this narrative about hope and new beginnings resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the transformative power of human connections. And you? Have you experienced an encounter that completely changed the course of your life? Share with us.